Hey everybody, this is Jeremy Carlson, and you're listening to the Bluegrass Sports Performance Podcast. Today we are talking with Coach Mark Hoover, Director of Strength and Conditioning at York Comprehensive High School, located in York, South Carolina. Coach, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you, Jim?
I'm doing great. Hey, thanks for hopping on. I would said this before we got started, but I really appreciate you doing this. It is a great honor to be able to have you on. You've been very nice, and I will say to any coaches out there, Coach has done an excellent job of being a resource for coaches that are looking to get into technology or just ask different things about programming. So I really appreciate you hopping on and doing this, and also being a great resource to me for the past couple of years now.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, Coach, before we really get going into the programming aspect of things, just kind of share with our listeners a little bit about your background. And you go far back as you want there, but, how did you get to where you are today? Kind of give us that timeline.
Well, I started off as a football coach. That's what originally. It's funny. Originally, I was my first college degree was actually in communications and public relations, which has kind of played a nice role for me because of the social media and things like that. But did an internship with the St. Louis Cardinals at spring training. Decided to go. Well, actually, I was trying to decide between being a law enforcement officer and a teacher and a coach. And my mom, I had her grab the applications for me. And the first one she sent me was for a teaching program. So I went back to school, was coaching football, and like being the weightlifting guy, especially back then. And probably still a little bit that way, but back then, kind of the biggest guy was the guy that got handed the keys to the weight room. Didn't really matter because, well, probably you had the most knowledge anyway, just because you lifted weights back in the 90s. But I mean, I never even thought about, I played at a small college. Our strength coach was just one of the football coaches. And I believe I played in the early 90s, but in college, but I believe we did bigger, faster, stronger as our program. But it worked. So, but anyway, I just kind of did my thing, and I was coaching football and got more and more into the strength conditioning as far as, that's what I tell people. Like I have a little more leeway about some things I can say about meat-headed football coaches, because there probably was not any more of a meat-headed, lift heavy, don't care about sprints and jumps football coach in America than I was. And I started to soften towards that a little bit, but I was lucky enough to be coaching at a school in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and our head football coach said, "Hey, you're doing a great job in the weight room, but I'd really like you to make this something." This is probably 15, 16 years ago. "I really want you to make this something that's your thing." And I said, "All right." And he's Ethan Reeve, who is a legendary strength coach in our field, was a strength coach at Wake Forest. His son played JV football for us. And so we had open access to Ethan. And that was a life-changing day for me, because I walked in, and I tell people this every time we talk about it. I walked into the weight room at Wake really feeling like I had a grasp on it. Like our guys were strong, and we were big, and we could bench and squat and clean. And then I met Ethan and walked in. He if anybody's ever knows him well, they know he just kept his desk in the weight room, wasn't even in the office. And I sat down with him, and we started talking. And at that moment, I knew that I didn't know anything, really. And just from one conversation with him, it made that much of an impact. And he was gracious enough to mentor me during those times. And still today, I don't see him or talk to him as much. We communicate through social media, but he allowed me to go up there anytime the school would actually give me a day off every couple of weeks to go up there. I mean, it was really something special. I got to go to pro day, the whole deal. And so I spent that year kind of bumming around with him, and that changed my life. I tell people that was the day that I stopped being a football coach that did some strength in the weight room, and I started being a strength coach that coached football. And then in about I did this, and right up until about 2014 or 15. I can't remember. It was the last year I coached football. And it got to the point where I was doing so much with strength conditioning, and I was you know how it is. The more you learn, the more you realize you need to know. It kind of got. And I was working with, our volleyball coach came and said, "Hey, will you work with the girls?" And then I'd been working with wrestling, and the school I was out here in North Carolina was multiple state championship wrestling program, and they were all about the weight room. So that was taking up a bunch of time along with football. So I went to the principal and said, "Hey, I need to get out." And he said, "Are you going to be happy not coaching football?" And I said, "Man, I'm miserable coaching football right now. As much as I used to love it, I want to be doing other things." And so that kind of, I spent a year and a half, 2 years at that point there at Piedmont, where my daughter just graduated high school from. Um, and then a buddy of mine, John Herschel, who's at Saraland, Alabama now. We became good friends just through the National High School Strength Coach Association. And we drove to the very first NatCon together. He was at York, and I remember driving by and I picked him up, and I was like, "Is that the school?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's phenomenal, like the facilities." And so then he calls me up the next year in August and says, "Hey, um, the job's going to be open. I'm going back to Alabama," and I couldn't leave at that point, because it was August 1st. It's hard to leave, you're August 1st. I said, "Well, the next time the job opens up, let's talk about it." Now, by next time, I kind of thought like a few years down the road or whenever the next strength coach. And he calls me back um, the week of Halloween, so a couple months later. And he said, "Hey, the guy that they were looking for, a certified strength coach that was also certified in PE, and they were struggling to find him, and the guy that they hired couldn't pass the test and all the different things, the PE test. They want to talk to you." I'm like, "Well, by October, the season's about over for football." So, okay. So I call the AD. This is on a Tuesday. He said, "Hey, can you come tomorrow for an interview?" I said, "Nope, I can come Thursday." So I go Thursday. Interview seemed to go well. Friday, well, actually Thursday night, the head football coach calls me and says, "Hey, if they offer you this job, you gonna take it?" And I said, "Yeah, probably." Well, then Friday, my people on my resume start calling me and saying, "Hey, I just got off the phone with," and then Monday morning I get the job offer, and I decide to take it. And I go to my principal, whose son actually plays basketball at Clemson, Hunter Tyson. Great principal, great people, great family, and we were buddies. But he said, "Well, I want you to stay at least to the end of the semester." Well, that didn't work for York, so he's like, I said, "Oh man," he's like, "the end of the semester's too long." He said, "Can you stay till Christmas?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess I can stay till Christmas." And he's like, "Can you stay till Thanksgiving?" And I was like, "It's only 3 weeks." I'm like, "Yeah, I guess." And he said, "When do you want to go?" And I said, "Now." And he's like, "All right." He said, uh, "Take the next 2 days off, come back Friday, bring your letter of resignation, and I'll release you on Monday." So, so I interviewed on Thursday. I mean, it was like from Herschel calling me to being in the weight room at York was like a 10-day turnaround.
Wow, that's quick.
It's crazy. I mean, we have a PE opening right now that we can't fill. It's been like 2 months, and mine was just boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that path. The whole meeting Ethan and all that changed my life in the fact that I went back to school and I pursued education and certifications and those things. But I will be honest with you, very little of that plays any role in anything I do on a day-to-day basis. Almost everything that I know and use and have learned has been kind of pursuit of education on my own. Sitting down and talking to people, and this platform has been, I guess, really Twitter is kind of how it started. But this platform, where I remember one of my girls' basketball players at Piedmont said, "Coach Hoover, you're Twitter famous. You have 500 followers." And then and then it just kind of just exploded into this thing that has opened up so many doors for me and allowed me to talk and have on speed dial some of the most talented, unbelievable people in the world in our field, and able to reach out to them. That's really been the coolest thing, because it's just I was listening to and I'm so long-winded. I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
you're
glad
fine.
you edit this up. I was listening to Joel Reinhardt. He's at Stanford, the sports science guy at Stanford today, and he was talking about using you look on Twitter. I probably retweeted like 6 things that he said. He was talking about how they're using GPS and how they're working with football coaches to look at how each day is, from the previous season, and then kind of matching it up and using, what they're doing in practice and what player loads that's giving them, and then trying to, and he says, I'm not here to take away things. I'm here to organize things so that they can play as much football as humanly possible during the week and still be ready to go on Saturday. And the whole process he was talking about just blew my mind, because although it's a scaled down version of it, it's really something that almost exactly what we're doing at York with GPS. And it was just, I would have had no concept about GPS or anything if it wasn't for just being able to meet people and talk to people, and it's really been something. So I'm pretty grateful.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's great to hear too. I think a lot of people take different paths to get into strength and conditioning. So I always like leading with that question, because it allows people to see that there is no one set path. Again, we imagine a set path with being, you do your undergraduate in some type of kinesiology, exercise science, then you go on to do an internship and maybe some type of master's along the way, and then we progress up the field. But it's always unique to hear the path, because it really does reassure that no matter where you necessarily start, it's all going to be kind of windy and turny, and it's got to be what you make out of it. So the one thing I want to return to the education in a second, but the one thing that you made mention of is that you were sitting in this place where you were the football coach that was in the weight room. And then that transition slowly started to happen where you were more of the weight room coach that also happened to coach football. How was that transition? How did it work with your principal, your AD? Because I think there are probably quite a few people that are out there that may tune in and listen to this that may be in a similar situation where they want to be in the weight room. They feel that pull where they're getting pulled away from it, because I'll be the first to admit, I'm the head boys soccer coach. When I get done with my day of coaching, I maybe get like 30 minutes with kids right after school to train them, and then I'm hopping on a bus and I'm going to travel, 30 minutes to go to a game, and I'm there all night. Well, that means I got no opportunity to sit with the volleyball team or to do those different things that are really important as a strength and conditioning coach. So how was that transition? How did it work? Was there any bumps that you hit along the way that you kind of tell our listeners about that maybe you had to navigate through?
Well, I'll say this. I was blessed that I worked for an extremely supportive administration. I hear horror stories of people going to their principals and they say, "Oh, we need you coaching this, we need you coaching that, and we can't let you." And I went to him, and he kind of looked, because I was giving up my fairly decent football stipend for my strength conditioning stipend, which was $300 a sports season. So he kind of went, but I went to him, and my big thing was I can impact 80 kids or all the kids. Where's my, I feel my what I want to do and what my passion is. It was football. It's crazy. I got called in for a friend of mine said, "Hey, come up and talk to our staff about strength conditioning." And I walk in, the first thing he does is draws up a formation, and he's like, "Hey, how would you run the jet sweep with this?" And I looked at him like, "Good God, dude, you make me going all the way back in the file cabinet there for that."
Yeah.
But that was my passion. That's what I spent a lot of time talking about when I spoke at clinics. It was about football and things like that. But it just changed, and I was very lucky to have an administration that was growth minded enough to see that I was, confident and dedicated enough to want to switch my roles.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing he asked me was, "Are you going to be happy?" And I said, "I'm going to be extremely happy because now, you know, I'm coaching football and I'm affecting our football players. And then when I have time, I'm helping our volleyball team. And then when I have time, helping our wrestling team. And then a little bit more of the wrestling in the winter. And then, of course, it didn't hurt that his son was a Division I basketball prospect that was in the 8th or 9th grade then. And I said, hey, I could work with basketball now too.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have those little, what's that? Luck is when opportunity meets whatever. I don't know what that saying is, but all those things. So for me, luckily, the transition was extremely smooth. I think that I was probably the first public school strength conditioning only coach in North Carolina. There was a lot, obviously, in the private schools. There was a lot of football strength conditioning guys, but there wasn't any that I could find that only did what I did in a public school. At that point, now it's different. Charlotte is just hiring them left and right now. But yeah, that was very beneficial to me to have that type of person. I think you have to lay out your plan to your administration and show them, because their first thing is going to be like, holy cow, how are we going to replace this? I was an offense. I had been the defense coordinator, which wasn't my forte, but I think I was the offensive coordinator then. So all they're thinking, oh my God, we got to finish. We got to, find a new offensive coordinator. So much, and I say this with a lot of love for the game of football. There's a lot more people that can be successful as an assistant football coach than there are doing what we do, because it's just, really, mastery of the mundane is what is really what, most of what we do isn't the flashy stuff. When I was a football guy that was big into like it was all about the record board and the bench and the squat and the deadlift and the clean. And now I'm not going to say those are the least important things, but I would list 50 things more important than those things. And so I think it's just a matter of showing what value you can bring to the school and to the students and to your school district, and and then just approaching it like that. And that was there was really not a lot of big hiccups, other than just stepping away from what I'd been doing for I coached I don't 3 years in college and probably 15 maybe or 16 in high school. So it was but I had somebody tell me one time, a retired football coach, when I was thinking about this, and he said, the day that I got out of football was the day that I realized how great my life really was because of the time, of course, and then you step into a job that is every bit as time consuming. The only person that spends even close to the same amount of time on campus as I do, coaching wise, is the head football coach. And so it's not like we get a bunch of time off, but it's a little bit different, as far as particularly the meetings. The meetings was what was really like, I was tired of watching that, and I was tired of sitting in those meetings and talking about how we were going to block a 6'3", 280-pound guy with our 5'9", 220-pound guys. And, I just got tired of it. And it was for me, it was a great move.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those that I hope more and more public schools are going to get to that point. It sounds like South Carolina is taking in that direction. North Carolina is taking that direction. I think Kentucky right now, we're still a little behind those trends. We're probably where you all were 10 years ago.
It's regional, man.
Yeah.
There's parts of South Carolina that 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 don't, and there's parts that don't pay enough for, like, um, they use it as a additional stipend for a
Mhm.
football coach,
Mhm.
and that's something you got to get by. I think that, certain areas on our state, Spartansburg, Columbia, Charlotte, where people recognize the value of having, a specialization in positions. It's like you wouldn't, when if my tooth aches, I don't go to the brain surgeon, or if I break my arm, I'm not going to go to the dentist. So we're all coaches, but you still want to go to the person that, like the dentist has enough medical knowledge to keep you from dying, probably,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
but they're not going to be able to go into the weeds with things. And that's the same thing. There's a few. Um, Another guy, if you really want a really great interview Donnie Kiefer sometime, the head football coach at West Ashley. That's the single greatest combination football strength coach that I've ever known. I mean, there's not a whole lot like him. You
No.
know, you're chasing two rabbits, you're going to catch none most of the time. And kids are so resilient that people don't don't realize that. So it's hard, and uh, what happens is, you get into areas where they start hiring coaches, and then the next school says, "Whoa, we gotta have this too," and it starts to spread. North Carolina, it's in Charlotte, but it's not a lot of other places outside of Charlotte. There's still that, and I got, I'm going to say this, I guess, but a lot of that has to do with ego, and a lot of it has to do with the arrogance of the coaches themselves, thinking that somehow they could do a better job
Mhm.
doing two things, one being football coach, where my job is to coach football,
Mhm.
and then the other thing being the weight room, but strength and conditioning is so much more than the weight room. In
Mhm.
fact, the weight room is one of the, like I would argue the easiest pieces. Like
Mhm.
anybody can make someone strong. Progressive overload is like, weightlifting for dummies, progressive
Mhm.
overload, So I think that it just comes with education of the community, and it's starting to spread, but there's still places that, like I had a head football coach, successful one too, call me up and asking me questions, and then said, this is no joke. He said to me, um, "I have a lot of respect for guys that do what you do, but um, hiring strength coaches gets football coaches fired." And
Mhm.
I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "No, you have someone running your speed and strength program. That's a good way to get yourself fired." And I said, "Well, you must have hired a really terrible strength coach." And he kind of laughed. He said, "No, I'm not giving that duty over to anybody." And I thought, I mean, you have a punting coach probably, like you give every duty over to everyone else,
Yeah.
and you don't think that it would behoove you to find someone that was a qualified specialist in the field and bring him on.
Mhm.
So, but there'll come a time when, I would guess, I had this conversation with an athletic trainer not too long ago. I would guess we're probably at the place athletic trainers were like in the early 90s, where, I've been in the early 90s, York, the schools in Columbia, the schools in Spartansburg, the schools in Charlotte probably all had an athletic trainer at their schools, and everybody else was sitting around going, "Oh, we've had that. We have first responders come to every game,"
Mhm.
and now it'd be pretty hard to be able to field the sports without athletic trainers. And I think it's probably heading in that direction, especially with just the education of people on exercise and on, the science and is everything that goes into it. I could not possibly do what I do in coach football. There's something like Donnie Kiefer, he can't.
Yeah.
Me, no way, no way. I can't. I spend. That's what I joke with with our head football coach, because when he first came in, he was kind of like, he'd always been a strength case his own. And we got talking, and I told him, well, here's the good thing. You have to spend 80% of your time on football and then maybe 20% on speed, strength, mobility, power. So just think about this. The 80% of the time that you're thinking about football, I'm thinking about the 20% that you think about. It's 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
It never stops. So it's just like, it's common sense. You could not possibly spend the time that I can, if you're coaching another sport, studying and learning and mastering the craft of football. That doesn't mean you can't be good. I mean, there's a lot of people that are excellent strength coaches, but I'm just saying it is really hard to go as deep as you can without giving up your sport.
Oh, there is no question about that. That's been one thing that I've learned again in my role since I've dropped down from the college level. At the college level, that's all I was focused on. That's all I thought about every single day. Now at the high school level, and again, you could probably talk to this better than I can because you've been in it longer, but I got to think about being the head soccer coach. Well, that comes with scheduling all 20 some odd games, making sure that we have buses set up, make sure there's so much background information that goes on to being a head coach of any sport. And then football, it becomes even more.
You guys have that Planet, like this was what would get me out of it. That Planet High School. You guys use a thing called Planet High School? I don't know what you might call it, where the kids got to turn in like 37 sheets of paper, every possible, their physical, their
yeah.
great grandmother's birth certificate,
yep. We've got a random drug form that they've got to turn in.
It is, and it's just collecting stacks of paper and making sure that it's insanity. It's insanity, and I can't even imagine. Like I can't even imagine having to do that. And it's nuts. If I can't ever see myself. My wife has asked me before, do I ever see myself going back to coach football? I said maybe when I'm like right at the end, and I go to a middle school, and I'm like, I can just do whatever I want, and I don't have to deal with a bunch of stuff. It's a lot less at middle school. But other than that, I have no interest at all.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's do this. Let's start turning our attention to York just in general.
Okay.
Just talk to us a little bit about York Comprehensive High School as a school, just so that we can kind of paint the picture before we dive into your programming here, because I think that a lot of the times coaches look from the outside, whether it be through Twitter, Instagram, or call you, or maybe come and visit, and they maybe don't see the 1,000-foot overview of, how many kids go to the school, how do you have periods broken up. That dictates a lot of programming considerations that are going to go into it. It doesn't make the final say, but it is going to play a role. So talk to us about York, where it's located, some demographics, different things like that.
So it is York, South Carolina is probably 20 miles outside of Charlotte. Rock Hill is between York and Charlotte. It's kind of the main area. It's very, very, on one end of it, it's suburban Charlotte and kind of a lake area. And then there's a massive amount of territory. York County is the biggest county size-wise in the state, to where we're 45 minutes probably. Kids can live apart from each other at least, and it's wilderness out, so it's kids from all over. It's very diverse, and it's very, I think we're probably in the upper 70s of poverty rate. You drive by the school and you wouldn't think that, because they raised a lot of money and built a great school, but that that's one of our challenges. 1,600 and some kids, so we're in the upper end of 4A, which we go up to 5A in South Carolina. It's a pretty nice setup for me. I have not coached a non-athlete in 6 years. I only have athletes. And I hear people say, "Oh, I absolutely love having the regular population mixed in with my athletes. It keeps," and I'm just like, huh? Like, Not me. Like, if you're going to give me a class of non-athletes, give me a class of non-athletes. Don't mix them in with the athletes, because I have at multiple schools I've never had, and I had one class when I very first came to York that was like that. It wasn't athletes; it was just regular kids. But and I enjoyed, being around them for the most part. But I also couldn't stand the fact that they didn't dress half the time, and they weren't interested in working out most of the time,
Mm-hmm.
and so my I absolutely embrace the fact that we're all athletic classes. Um, I could not do nearly what I do with our athletes if that wasn't the case, because, you know, like, today we had our girls basketball team in class and they were practicing. I got volleyball in there too, and they were getting ready for a game. So they're getting ready to leave. And we had our girls basketball team in there with heart rate monitors up on a screen, and we were doing some conditioning drills with them. I say conditioning, but it's kind of like we were having them change direction until their heart rate hit 75%, and then they would shoot a free throw until it dropped back down to 65, and then they'd start to change the direction again. A little circuit we did with that. But what would I do with the non-athletes during that time period?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would either have to lower what I'm doing with our athletes and not do such things like this, or I would have to somehow figure out a way to have the non-athletes go and sit in the stands and watch. And so I am not a big fan of the mixed classes. So I'm glad we have it the way we have it. But yeah, so I teach. Technically, I teach 6 out of 8 periods in the year. We're a block schedule. But in the spring, I was just talking to my assistant principal about this. It gets me out of duties. So that's kind of cool. But I teach all 4 periods because our varsity football team splits into 2 groups during the spring. We have them in class year round. So they split in, and my planning period is second block, when the majority of our uh, high school, our varsity skill players
Okay.
are in that class. And I'm like, I'm not going to be sitting in my office next door when our guys are, so I just go in there, and they, there's some kind of rule against paying except in emergency situations. So, they cut me some breaks here and there, but I don't mind doing that. But so I teach 7 out of the 8 basically. So this semester it's kind of cool. I got a second block plan.
Yeah.
So I got our entire football team is a first block. I think we have about 70 in there right now.
Wow.
And then I've got a planning period, which is 90 minutes. And then I've got it used to be soccer and wrestling, and then wrestling just kind of, that's another thing. I don't chase coaches around and say, hey, you need to be in here work with me. I offer my services. And if you want to do something different, or no hard feelings, enjoy yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you need me, let me know. And so that was wrestling kind of disappeared. So I've got a men's soccer class, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
There's 20 of them. They practice on Thursdays. The coach is our guidance counselor, so sometimes he's there. But that's one cool thing about soccer players is they've been doing it for so long that the guys that are juniors and seniors can just say, "Hey, here's practice for today."
Yep.
And so that was today. I was just out there watching practice, and then end of the day, I've got our girls basketball team, which volleyball, which is a fabulous class. I say this jokingly most of the time, but I've actually written this in an article that I wouldn't be opposed. I love coaching football and strength conditioning because
Mm-hmm.
it's like the money sport. It is just, they get it, coaches get it. It's going to be a big deal. They're hooting and hollering all the time. But if it ever came down to where someone said, "Hey, coach just girls," I swear I would have at the very least think about it, because it's fabulous, man. My girls basketball and volleyball players, and then I'll have softball, girls soccer, and then I'll mix with some others in the spring. Awesome. Like, you don't have to fuss at them. I mean, the worst thing is, like, today I look over, I look in the gym over it, and then there's a girl sitting over there, and she's just sobbing, and I'm like, okay, I see you need to go over there and see what's going on, because I thought for sure like it was, but she had fallen and hurt her knee or something. So she, it was like something that I could actually help with. But when
Yeah.
I saw her stop, but other than that, and I have a daughter, so um it's okay. I kind of get it, but it's awesome. And then in the spring, I got football, ninth grade football. So 3 football classes. Our freshman football team, it used to be basketball, football, but again, they just kind of stopped when the basketball coaches changed. They just kind of stopped coming. Um, and then I've got the entire baseball team, every one of them. Like you basically can't be on the baseball team and not take a fourth block baseball class. Some have tried, but it never works out for them because they practice during that time.
Gotcha.
And then I've got the female athletes, softball, soccer, and some others.
So
That's my schedule.
You've got 90-minute classes. Is that right?
Yes.
90-minute classes, and it's blocked. So do you see them then 3 days a week and then 2 days, or do you just see them every day?
5 days a week.
Do you see them all 5 days a week?
So my football team, and that's what people will probably look at some of the stuff that I do and say, how in the world are they doing this, doing that? With my football guys, I get them 180 days a year for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Basic.
Yes.
In season, it's a little bit less. I kind of joked. I had a coach come in and visit me yesterday, and we were kind of just sitting there waiting. And I got like 12 minutes with the defense in the weight room and then like 18 minutes with the offense. And I said, it's like anywhere else. At the beginning of the season, you start off with 40 minutes and 40 minutes. And then as you go into the season, the film stuff. But yeah, so, and then all summer, like, that whole big debate about how much conditioning you should or shouldn't do, like our football guys are there. So we go through spring practice in May. So they practice and they play a game. And then they take a week off. And then we come back and we go 4 days a week for 3 hours, lifting, speed, plyometrics. They practice for an hour and a half. And then I think they played 30 7-on-7 games this summer.
Wow.
And we had 4 lineman challenges. And then you got the 4th of July, and then you got a 3-day dead period right before football starts. And then you're in it, man. So I get them like 230 days a year.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's why we can do so much with it. And it's not as this probably sounds terrible, but particularly in our area, multi-sport, if you're a football player, means you play football, and then for the most part, you kind of do the other stuff on the side. Yeah. And I know that's not, football and track go a little bit together, but particularly at our school and at some of the other schools in our area, football's the sport. That's just South Carolina. Football's the sport. And then after football, you go and have some fun playing basketball, and we might have a sprinkling of baseball guys, but for the most part, baseball is kind of becoming so. No, I don't agree with that, but that's just kind of the way it's worked. So it's almost like I've got them, captured for 4 years, year round.
Yeah, that's all. So
yeah,
and then dive into that. So it can be football, it can be basketball, whatever sport it is. But you've got 90 minutes, 5 days a week. So how are you filling up that whole 90 minutes? What does that look like? It sounded like maybe sometimes we get practices or something in there as well. So talk to us a little bit about that, because I can't imagine they're with you or maybe they are the whole 90 minutes.
So off-season teams so football is from the day football season ends. So when football ends, they'll have a week. Coach gives them a week where they're still in class, so we still have to do stuff. But they do their meetings and they turn in their equipment, and then we have a 3-day. I don't know what we'll do this year because this is Coach it's kind of a cool time for me because I'm kind of just planning for the off season then. They take them to the gym, and they last year they played like a fierce 3-on-3 basketball tournament, and it went for 3 days. And those guys, that's what people are like. Not to change something, but people are like, I can't believe sometimes you're lifting so much on game day. And I was like, if we took them in the gym
Oh,
and put a basketball out, they would tear each other limb for limb. And you want me like, I shouldn't bench 3 sets of 3 on game day. It's too heavy. Those guys would go 90 minutes nonstop up down the court and be just fine on Friday night because they're kids.
yep.
But so, but then last year we actually played for our conference championship and lost. So we still got a home game, and we got upset. Like it was depressing, man. Like we really thought we were in for a run last year. So our off season started like November 14th last year. Because we lost, and then they got a week, and then so November 14th we jumped right into it. And so from November 14th until spring ball in May, I do have 90 minutes every day. Other sports, it just all depends. Boys soccer, I got them half the year. I don't have them, so they'll come after school. I usually go down there, and for our soccer teams, the girls soccer, they used to all be in class, but now it's kind of like half and half. I'll go down just to get them doing something, and I'll stand right in the middle. Because our boys and girls soccer is the same sports season.
Okay.
So I'll have the boys lined up like from the 40 back and the girls from the 40 back, and we do isometric everything's. Like anything you can imagine isometrically. That's kind of how we get it in. And then we use some other footwork stuff. But for the most part, basketball, they go every other day for the most part. So I'll have varsity will practice, JV will lift like on a Monday, then Tuesday they switch, Wednesday they switch, Thursday they switch, and then Friday everybody's in there. And it's like it's kind of a more of a game day lift like atmosphere, like high energy, just because there's just so many of them in there.
Yeah.
It can't be as like that's one thing that I love about having these. And when I got 13 girls basketball players, and that's who I'm coaching for 90 minutes, we can do a lot, So, and it's not always that way because volleyball is kind of in and out too because they got things going too. But and then baseball, we have a new coach. Previous coach, 2 coaches ago, it's the third coach I'm in here. 2 coaches ago, he wanted them lift. So unless they had a game and had to leave early, they were lifting or doing something with me. And then he didn't want to be in the weight room. He didn't want to know. He walked in there on the first day and said, I'm not going to step foot in this weight room again unless Coach Hoover needs me to. And if Coach Hoover needs me to, you're all going to wish you had. Like that. And he walked out. That was the last I saw of him, for the most part in the weight room. And then our last coach, they lifted in the morning. So he wanted to come in and in the morning, and they kind of did their own thing, and that was fine. And then during class, I might have the JV for a little bit, but for the most part, they started baseball practice as soon as class started. So if they didn't have a game, they were home at like 4:30. And so it kind of just depends on when I first started there, the men's basketball coach was there with me, so they practiced in class. Girls soccer was there; they practiced in class. Softball was there in the PE department; they practiced in class. So we had it set up like where it was like the end of the day. I had like 6 teams in 4th block, and I'd have each of them for a 40-minute block, and it would go 1 week they'd get 3 with me, and 1 week they'd get 2, and the other they'd practice. Well, then people started leaving, and our soccer coach was extremely successful. So she went on to her next opportunity, and just things kind of changed. And now it's not quite that way. But so it's just kind of hit or miss.
Well, it's interesting to hear again. I think a lot of the times, and I know I'm guilty of this, I get a snapshot into your program because I'm very thankful that you put things on Twitter and Instagram and different things like that. And, you had something out there about you working on, change of direction drills. And I'm sitting here in my head going, all right, Coach Hoover's getting this figured out. How do I get it figured out? And then it's interesting to hear how it's set up because the setup allows for that, right? Like I get my kids for 5 days a week. But our area where we lift and we do our change direction stuff, it's a bus ride away. And we have 6 periods during the day. So they've got to take them from the high school, bus them down to me. We got to get changed, get warmed up. By the time I've done that, 25, 30 minutes, we're going to lift and then we're going to get out, right? I mean, like I've got kids that are playing 3 sports in one season. Well, what are they doing? They're changing direction. They're doing different things like that. What aren't they doing? They're not lifting after school. Well, we're going to lift and we're going to get out, right? But again, it's interesting to hear, and it's what I've been so excited about and talking to people about this is to get the background, because I think once you start understanding the background a little bit about the school, it changes what you can do, right? So it's interesting too to hear that a school like York, and maybe it's a little bit more common in South Carolina, where we are in Kentucky, and then where I'm from in Seattle, we never had kind of the ability to do with maybe some in-school practices or in-school lifting and stuff like that. So it's really interesting to hear that. So I appreciate that. So turning to the next portion of it is starting to talk about programming. I think you're going to show us women's or girls basketball. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so we'll pull that up here. And again, for those that are listening on the podcast, this will be on YouTube if you guys want to take a look at it and take a look at what Coach is doing here. And I'm just going to have Coach kind of start working his way through it. And I'm going to have him start with giving a shout out to Cody Hughes, because I also use this template, and I know that you said you just started using it. So tell us some things about how the template works and then what you like about it.
So yeah, I started, maybe a month ago, and Cody and I are good buddies. We talk daily, and I wanted to, but I got used to using. I used to use Team Builder, and I was using Coach Me Plus, and I was kind of all over the place with it, and I gave up on sheets years and years ago because I looked around my weight room and I had different kids in different groups, and green sheets, blue sheets, yellow sheets, and it was crazy. And I was just like, I got to fix. So I went to Team Builder, and Team Builder was awesome. But now I'm using all this other technology, particularly with this group, the varsity girls basketball. They use all the technology. They are experts at VBT. They really are. I don't have to tell them anything about VMAX Pro. They calibrate that thing. They know where to give it. So I thought, you know what? Let me try Cody's sheets with the girls and just ask them what they like. So it wasn't one day, and my girls were like, Coach Hoover, please stay on these sheets. And I was like, why? And they were like, flipping back and forth on the iPad. It's just a drag, trying to log in. There's always something not showing up. There's always, why is this date wrong? With Cody's sheet, it takes you back to printed sheets, but I've kind of grasped onto that again, having it right there. But it's very flexible. You can put what you need in there. You can scale it the way you need. And I know he's got something. He keeps like teasing me with something new thing. He was like, man, it's going to blow your mind. He'd like shoot me a screenshot. And I asked him a few things, and he said he wasn't trying to be an online platform. So like a Team Builder or Coach Me Plus. So I'm not exactly sure where he's going with it, but I can't wait. But anyway, so this is awesome. I can't imagine that he sat down and did this, because it's unbelievable, and it works like a charm. I probably will go with football with this too, because they use a lot of VMAX Pro and VBT stuff too, and there's a computer element to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, my guy's soccer team doesn't use any technology because, well, you're a soccer coach, but they're soccer players,
Yep.
so they don't care, like they just they like to lift and it's cool, but it's not like it's very, very our most advanced soccer players are using Wendler 531.
Yep.
The ones that are ready to do those type of things.
Yep.
And they love it. It's simple, and you can put this on there. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So this is girls basketball. Again, this is not a pro. This is like my girls basketball team, not from a wins losses standpoint, but just from a strength and conditioning coach standpoint, is an elite group. So they're doing some things. So if you're looking at this template, it's a 3-day template. He's got 3 and 4. We're a tier system, modified tier system, but a tier. So this is a 3-day. I got what you're going to see there is in our tier A. All those you were asking about that earlier about our testing and our assessing.
Mm-hmm.
I could not possibly assess and collect data the way I do if I did it independently of training.
Mm-hmm.
You have to build into your training. Like, how do I have time to measure power? Well, you got to squat or whatever you're going to do, so you can build that in, to the workout. So what you see there in tier A is really more of a assessment tier. We've got barbell squat jump. They're doing 2x5. I use the bench as I can't remember where I got that from. I wish I could, because I'm like, I tell people I've just mastered thievery, and figuring out a way to what I steal that fits into our program.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. But the bench, they might all go to a little bit different heights, but it's consistent for that person.
Mm-hmm.
So I have them touch and go on the bench. They do 2 sets of 5 with the VMAX Pro. And they don't have to record anything because VMAX Pro's collecting it. And then I record their peak power from a week to week. I find it extremely useful, extremely helpful in programming.
What do you find in some of those numbers? I mean, help us understand what you might see in some of those peak power, either trends over time, different things like that.
So let me see if this will pop up. I think it will. I just had it up. It might not. Here it is. So this is bench. So it's upper body. But it says resources may affect audio quality. But anyway, so I'm looking for, now this sheet, I have things hidden. You can see it goes from B to O.
Yeah.
So this is girls basketball and volleyball. And I've been testing their upper body power once a week for the last 2 years.
Are you just testing that through bench press?
Yeah. When I do this with the guys, I usually do 30%, like 30% of their max. It's really easy with VMAX Pro because you can put percentage or velocity. So I just put 30%, 2 sets of 5. Guys do it, and it tells them what weight to load. You don't have to think. Yeah. What I found with the girls is when you start using like 30% of things, you get like below 45.
Yeah.
And so it's not the best. And I'm seeing with a couple of my athletes, like that Chantel Chisholm you see her in the middle there, she is just a beast. The bar is way too, I'm probably losing some of the effectiveness of the assessment with her because she is so strong. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, I kept it at 45 pounds. So that was, it's a little heavy for some of the smaller girls. It's not, but it gives me a consistent number to see, all right, this is what they were moving 45 pounds a year ago. So I'm looking at this, particularly with upper body, and I'm looking for outlying numbers, like multiple week drops. Or if it's just staying kind of steady, I'm going to add in more medicine ball stuff. And I found anecdotal, and it go to 11. It's here. But I found you go to some really explosive med ball throws for a couple of weeks, and it gets this number going again, So, and I'm just using it. Literally takes less than 5 minutes, and they got to warm up anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the biggest thing, trying to get my girls to understand that they're like, "Where's our warm up? We only have one warm up set." I'm like, "You just did 2 sets of warm ups."
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. So I'm looking at that, and I'm looking. So what you see over here, that max is their all time max.
Okay.
And then, this is what they've done recently.
Gotcha.
So, like right there, that's pretty significant for Jada. 229 to 315 down to 279. I'm not worried all that much by that 279, even though it's close to a 10% drop, or maybe I guess it would be more than a 10%. It was right at it, but I'm not that worried because 229 was her peak before that. If you could see further back.
Yeah.
Then you're looking at like right here, athlete number 8. I mean, she is lacking in strength. Like if that, and you can see that through a lot of other ways, but you always have these outliers. So let me see if I can make this pop up. So this is their jumps.
Okay.
I have not put in this week's numbers yet, but you look, I'm trying to get these basketball girls peaking out over the next couple of weeks because their practices start in November. And so last year, what I saw in both our power and I track watts per kilogram on their vertical jump. I saw a drop, like a 2-week drop, like across the board. And I was like, oh, geez, what am I doing wrong here? I'm trying to figure it. And all of a sudden, boom, I had just a massive jump. And I thought, okay, we went through something there, whether it was an adaptation as a team, stress from practices, whatever. Where do I go? 3 weeks before the first week of practice. So I emailed Cal Dietz. I heard Cal Dietz, like he's like one of my, I don't know him. I hope to meet him when I speak at TFC. I hope he's there. I mean, like he's the man.
Yeah.
So I'm listening to a podcast, and he said, I get 1,000 emails a day. So if you really want me to open it up, you have to put free whiskey in the tagline. So I put free whiskey, and I send him an email, and I say, here's my numbers. Where am I going now? Like, do I keep driving for some more power? Once we get into season, I start to peel that back, start to add, higher intensity, lower volume, because now they're getting jumps, they're getting a lot of practice. So we're working on strength. Where am I at here? And he came back. He said, impressive numbers. Great job. He's like, here's a link to my peaking program. Do this. And I was like, okay, sweet. So we did his peaking program, which is really good. It's a lot of band work. And I mean, like explosive, like stuff that I post and people probably go, what are they doing? But it really made a difference. Really made a difference. So I'm looking at those things, and I'm looking for fatigue, and I'm looking for big, like what happened. And then every once in a while, I'll get a big outlier. Like if you look at athlete 18, something happened there. I don't know what, but that is some kind of outlier there. So I just kind of don't pay attention to that. So even though that's on her peak, I really am looking at more like, all right, she's 646, 661, 638. That's an in-season volleyball player.
Gotcha.
So I'm looking for her to bounce back when volleyball's over, really hit something. So I'm looking at that, and I'm trying to keep that on a slow, steady increase, particularly in this time of season with our basketball players.
And what are you looking for if we're seeing a negative trend? Are you looking at, I think you said in there 10%. Is that where you see it? If you see it over like 3 weeks, we're dropping down. And then what does that potential conversation look like, either with the athlete, with the coach? If you see it across the board, is that something you go and discuss with the coach?
Oh, yes. Across the board for sure. And I've had that conversation. Just an example, it doesn't happen very often, but volleyball team was rolling in last year. So they played Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. They come in Wednesday for the lift, and I'm watching them walk in the door, and I'm like, something's up because they are dragging.
Mm-hmm.
They're vertical jump. I like to do a cold vertical. And when I don't have time to do something like this, I've got 3 plow nets, so they can just jump on there and do a cold vertical and I'm looking at their jumps, and I'm like, I mean, we didn't even get through the jumps. And I said, stop. Everybody stop. I was like, take off your shoes, follow me to the wrestling room.
Mm-hmm.
We went right into some original strength stuff, right into RPR, right into feet up on the wall. I walked out the door and held the door open, but I turned off the lights.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, don't talk, don't move, relax. And I gave them 10 or 15 minutes of just deep breathing. And when I flipped that thing on, they were all sleeping, and they popped up, and they went. And I asked Coach afterwards, I said, how'd they practice? She said, oh, I cannot believe we bounced back after playing, like, I don't know what overtime is in volleyball, but like, we played like 9 sets last night. I'm just like, well, when they walked in the weight room, they were jumping like 20% less than normal.
Mm-hmm.
You could look at them, and that's the number one. You want to monitor kids, look at them, talk to them. If all of them look run down, they're run down. So, but for the most part, the conversation I have here with the individual athlete, and it happens a lot, and that's the power, man. Some people are like, oh, monitoring, I don't have time for this and that. Yeah, you can see, but sometimes you can't see.
Yep.
And when there's outlying numbers, that's conversation time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a way to build trust with you and the athlete. You should see the crazy stuff that we do with all the RPR and the Dan Fichter, like neuro, touch your nose. I mean, I believe in all that. We do it. My kids don't even question. Why? Because they know how much I care about them. They know that if I feel something's going on, I'm going to stop and have a conversation with them. I ask them what's going on. I've had conversations with all of them pretty much. If I see something, I go to them. I have that conversation. What is going on? Like, girl, well, are you not sleeping or what? Because your eyes look like a raccoon, and they're just like, I just haven't been sleeping. I haven't been eating. The kind of the go-to thing that people always say is, they're going through a divorce, or their parents are fighting, and every once in a while something like that pops up, but it's usually way less than that.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually I just was on my phone until 4 o'clock in the morning. I just and I know this because, well, she's not next door right now because she's at UNC Wilmington, but I got one next door that will sit on that phone and look like that at 4 o'clock in the morning, and she was a phenomenal athlete.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the conversations I have, and it's a time where I can physically show them, here was your number, here is it now, what's different between now and then. Well, then rank, publish. I don't rank them, but I publish these. That's hanging on the wall. Tomorrow when I put it in, I'll print it out and hang on the wall. Trust me, the first thing those girls do is walk over and see what their best was and what their last was. And they're clicking on peak power on the VMAX Pro. They all know. So if one athlete one time says, oh, tomorrow we got that power thing, I should probably drink some water and go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Win, that's a win. So, those are, it builds, that's one other thing with female athletes is, and male athletes too, to an extent, but I'm telling you, the female athlete, once she understands that you're doing that for her, they'll do anything. I mean, they'll run through the wall for her, and that's this, every single girl on that list right there, to different, levels, but all would do anything I asked in that weight room or out on the track, or anything, just because they know that they just trust me because of the conversations we've had. So it can be a little bit, of a thing with the assessment stuff, but mostly on the back end for me, typing stuff in, because I could export it, put a CSV file, and all those different things that people do, but I'm old, so I type it in.
Yeah.
So but yeah, those are some. I mean, I really like that. Like, when you're looking at this athlete right here, athlete number 13, 9'11" was her peak, and then you can compare. You look at these other athletes, and that, I mean, that, but it just helps. You can go to the coach and just be like, she's a freak, man. Like, she got 9'11" on her jump, and that's the same athlete that yesterday we were in the weight room. They wear their heart rate monitors in the weight room too. And she came up and she's like, one of those days, she's just like jumping around and dancing and song and play. She's dancing and she looks up and she's like, my heart rate's at 81. I was like, let's see if you can get to close to 100. She's like, okay. So she just starts running around and like parkouring off the wall, and she was doing all these backflips. I look over and her heart rate was like, her max was like, I think is like 204 or something like that. And I look down and she's at 199 and she's doing a backflip at 199 beats. And I'm just like, that doesn't seem humanly possible, but it's just, it's just cool, and it's cool for them. They like to know this.
Yes.
They don't care what they squat. Chantel does, because Chantel is a beast. She's a 3rd-degree black belt. She does an iso split squat for 7 seconds with 275 pounds. I mean, so she cares because she's really strong.
Yeah.
But most of the other girls are like, they don't even talk in pounds. They want to know about watts and how high they jumped. So that's one of those things. But
and it's interesting once you start bringing to light some of those things, they have an opportunity to compete in different ways, right? Like, I mean, again, when you're competing in just the pounds or kilos realm, sometimes some people aren't going to be able to compete, or they're not going to understand the conversion between, hey, I only weigh 100 pounds as a female, or maybe I only weigh 130 pounds as a male. But man, I squat 3 times my body weight. Well, that's great. That's fantastic. But there's no way for them they can, if they really think about it, they can conceptualize it, but it's really hard. This gives them direct data and direct feedback right away.
You want to see the girl that's the most powerful on that whole list right there. You could say Catherine at 9'11" or Chantel at 885. Number 9, Grayson Carroll, 793. And look at her consistency: 771, 773, 793, 738. She weighs 107 pounds. She can't hold a candle to those those other two in the pounds and kilos. But from a power output standpoint, that is 5 feet, 104 pounds of dynamite right there.
No, yeah. And at the end of the day, that's
pride yourself on that.
Yeah, well, and that's what we compete in, right? Most of the time with athletics. Again, who knows? Chantel might end up being a power lifter, or I might end up being a weightlifter one day.
She probably will.
but there's few sports that actually compete in with that metric. Most of the time, it is based off of what you're showing there. So, okay, we've got down a rabbit hole. I appreciate you going down there.
Yeah, no problem. I'll go in a rabbit hole in a second.
Yes, but back to programming. So you're going to get them. You're going to get them in there. Barbell squat jump. It works out.
And the vertical.
Yeah, and the vertical, because you're going to be able to record both those. They're going to get warmed up while you also test it. So, okay, and then once we get done with that, we're going to move on to, it looks like hex bar, power shrug.
Yes. So tier system, I get, some people do strength first, some people do the dynamic first. I kind of change, I modify it some. Sometimes I do it one way, sometimes I do it the other, just depending on a lot of different things. In this instance, we're doing the dynamic first. We use the crap out of hex bar power shrug, where they load a weight. They start with 100 pounds, the girls do, and they're trying to hit a mean of 1.3 meters per second. It's kind of tough. It's kind of tough for them, but it's really hard for them to get over that, except for some of the really stronger girls. And I should probably just put a peak on there, but I just do a mean because of the programming is just a little bit easier with VMAX Pro for all of them. So they shoot for that. And basically I tell them, you're going to stay at 100 until you can get over that, and then you can add a 2.5, and
Mhm.
we've got a few that have gotten over it. But most of them are still working up. They're just trying to power shrug from the floor. And then Cossack squat is a big, like, if there's one thing that we're going to do besides, the big rocks, it's going to be Cossack squat. Um, and
And is there a particular reason why you found that to be useful?
I think that, um, that that lateral lateral movement as opposed to always doing the same uh, the same type of squat in the same plane. I think it changes things. I also think that I mean, the strength in the smaller muscles, you know, is is an important factor in changing direction. And I think the Cossack squat is something that, along with some isometrics, but I'm a fan of Cossack squat. The mobility of it, you should see what it does to heart rate runners. The Cossack squat with that full range of motion, almost going down to the floor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but and then we have these hamstring rollers that their Sorinex makes them. I think the ones I have are tight. I won some Sorinex ones at NatCon, the very first NatCon,
Mm-hmm.
and I forgot that they actually belonged to me when I left my old school, and I just left them in the closet there. So I ended up going and getting some from Titan, and so we've got one for each rack, and I've got a progression with that. The main coaching point there, if you see on the sheet, is another thing I like about Cody's thing is that little coaching point, and it's got to be brief, so you can't get like I'm so long winded. Who knows what I type? So whether it's they can 2 feet, 1 foot straight out, 1 foot straight up in the air. There's all different ways to adjust it. So I've
Mm-hmm.
got them all doing different things. So we have a clock, and I've got 3 minutes to do those.
Okay.
And they have basically one extra set of the auxiliaries. Show the auxiliaries.
So are you going to typically find with your girls there in this fourth block female class that you've got 3 or 4 to a group? Or are we just like,
Yes.
okay, 3 to 4
Yep.
so
Yep.
everybody has something to do while
Mm-hmm.
they're there. Okay.
Yep. Well, today, not to go off this class, but I
Yeah.
have the JV football game day lift, and I mean we're 6 weeks, into the season now, whatever. And I've been trying to get them, to. So today I actually went right back to square one, and I said, "Count with me, 1, 2, 3," and I was like, "Now count the guys in your group, and if you go less than 2 or more than 3, fix it."
Mm-hmm.
And then I walked them through. We've got 3 exercises, 3 people.
Mm-hmm.
This is what the girls. I would never have to do that.
Yeah.
They just you tell them, and um, they roll with it. So I might have a group of 2. I might have a group of 3. Every once in a while 4. But we've got 12 racks, and the group is often split in half.
Okay.
So our JVs and our varsity girls only live together on Friday.
Okay.
Because our JV girls do most of them. Some of them are starting to come along. They're not on to using the VMAX Pro yet, but they're coming along to some of these exercises.
Mm-hmm.
Others are still doing 1x20.
Yep.
So, and then our strength tier. Now we switch our squats up every 4 weeks. I was really we're working some strength obviously, but I was really wanting to do some acceleration. And so we went to the box squat for this 4 week, and the girls actually love it. They loved it. This was actually the highest, so I waived the volume and the velocities.
Okay.
I I wish I should have pulled that one up before we were talking, but yeah. So I have a wave for in season and for off season for the different groups. Football has it. The wave will go like 0.45, and then we'll go 0.65, and then we'll go 0.75, and then we'll go back. 0.40, and we'll kind of wave it down to where the last few weeks are for the playoffs. We more focusing on just strength and lower volume. But we also, in the off season here, we're waving volume too. So this was their big volume week.
Okay.
So they might have went 6 sets of 2 in their squat for a volume of 12, and then 5 sets of 3 for a volume of 15, and then 5 sets of 5 for a volume of 25. And then if we need a deload week, we might go 6 sets of 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it sounds, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I know that you've posted a YouTube video about it and I listened to it, and then I think I texted you about this as well. But one of the influences that you have was Johnny Parker and
Yes.
the way, and so it sounds a little bit like this, and how. And I don't remember. Didn't you post a video about it? Am I right about that? You posted yourself going through and showing how you waved some of the volumes and taking in some of the Soviet periodization
Yes.
he
So
brought along as well in that book.
I did that. I
It was
I
during
did a
COVID?
presentation on that. It might have been for NatCon. I
It
can't
might have been
remember.
something.
There was something I was doing for it.
Yeah.
But yes, so heavily influenced by Johnny Parker and that group and that's a whole nother, like,
We won't go down the rabbit hole, but give us
let's do.
yeah, because that's a long one. And again, the presentation was great. And that's why I fell in love with it and was able to then go read Coach Parker's book. Give us the 30-second brief basics of the book, kind of that little spiel, and then we'll move on and we'll keep going with the programming.
So you set up you're looking for a 10% volume change month to month. You start at the end and you kind of work yourself back, taking 10% of the volume off. And then you're looking for like a 2% increase in relative intensity. So as the volume changes, the relative intensity is changing. And it's a little bit opposite of what some people do, which is, our volume is increasing or decreasing, so our intensity is increasing. Theirs is a slow increase, kind of in both. And to the point where volume is actually, like, even if you didn't change your intensity and you change your volume, you're going to get very similar adaptations. And that's kind of, if you ever get a chance to get on that, as deep down that rabbit hole as you can. I have not talked to him in a couple of years now, which is a shame. But because I used to call him all the time, and it was great. But he will tell you that they thought they really had it down. First, kind of like they're like the second generation of strength coaches, but the first real, like, that's was their, and then a Soviet, a former Soviet, sports science genius ended up being here in America. They sent their stuff to him, and he red penned it all over the place and said, "Just come up here and let me teach you." And it was all the Soviet, the wave system. That you obviously have to adjust it a lot for high school because I ran it almost with just a little bit of an adjustment the first year, and I had to stop and kind of reset because I'm like, that is way too many reps for these guys, but so you scale it, but the same philosophy of a light week, a moderate week, a heavy week, and a kind of a middle of the road week. And you want to do your heavy week followed by your light. And then, you kind of, so, and it's just waving things, moving things around, different things. So I do that with our volume, and all the velocity is just intensity. So like, people are like, it's such an advanced thing, but I mean, if you're going to go 5x5 at 83%, how about I'll just go 5x5 at 0.5 meters per second? It'll be approximately the same load, but it might be 87% one day and 82% one day, based on their and when you do this VBT stuff, I started in 2014, and you really see it. You really see it. It's a auto regulation tool that is second to none that I've ever, so the girls would be like, that's 10 pounds less than I did the last time we did. And I'm just like, well, you're tired today. I mean, I don't know. Let's tell you, just do it. And so then we are RDL like driven. Like RDLs are it's actually our base lift on Wednesdays for football. We do our squats on Mondays, our RDLs on Wednesdays, and our benches on Friday. And that's a biggie for us. And I kind of do this.
Is there any particular reason why the RDL is? Because we've seen a few coaches start making a point for this. Is there anything that you found in particular that you like about it?
I feel like that that posterior chain is, if it's strong and powerful, they're probably going to be healthy and fast. And again, anecdotal evidence, and maybe I just am jumping on that RDL bandwagon. But when people started to say that should be a big lift over the last couple of years, and I'd always used it, I started to look and say, who is always great at RDLs? My best athletes are always RDL monsters. So and then I find that, it's a tough skill to master. That hinge is tough, but once they master it, I just feel like strengthening that area of the body is extremely important for all of our athletes. And the other thing this is just for is we don't deadlift. We trap bar deadlift or hex bar, whatever you want. So, basically we're working, our quads, and our hips, and we're leaving a little bit left on the table there with the posterior. And the RDL, heavy RDLs, and I mean, I make them, I push them on those RDLs because they want to go in there and put 10s on each side. It's like, oh no. And I think that offsets the negatives of the trap bar without having to bring in. And I know deadlifting, people be like, it's safe, and I agree. Yep. I just don't want, and it's the same reason that Cody talks about with cleans. These athletes don't do cleans, but we do some cleans. But for the most part, I'm looking for something that they can get really efficient at really fast.
Yeah.
So, and then the spring ankle, that's Chris Corfus, Cal Dietz. We are spring ankles. And then our tier D, we're doing in that bent over barbell row and standing tricep curl. It's kind of like a hypertrophy, tier, but not really, because it's, the barbell row is something that's very important. That's one that I don't do it as much with the girls, but I started to make that tier a user's choice, meaning I want you to row. You pick the row. You can do a landmine row with the hand attachment. You can do a barbell row. You can do weighted pull-ups. I want you to row. I want you to do something to that movement. And but that's kind of day one. And you can see all 4 athletes in the group. There are 4 in this group. And then there's only 2 days on this particular one, because our third day is a little bit different. We go off the whistle and it's high energy. This is their upper body. We do a lot of speed stuff on this day. So we don't, we probably should do it on a lower body day. And when I say speed stuff, we're doing some sprints with basketball just because sprints are awesome. But for the most part, it's I shouldn't really say speed. I should say movement. But in our schedule, that's how it fits in. So they're doing their peak power bench test. They're benching. They're doing some more rows. They're doing some more posterior chain. And no matter what, if there was only one thing that we did all week, it would be Tier C day 2 with every one of
Okay.
my athletes.
Tell us why. This is another one that if you work your way around the Twitter strength and conditioning, you've seen a big push
Yes.
for recently.
Yeah. And, I've been an isometric guy, for probably at least 6 or 7, whenever I got into Calhoun's triphasic. But it is something that is popular. So you see a lot of it's kind of like Brandon Pig. Someone asked him that the other day, and he said that's a tough question to answer. It's kind of like asking what the advantage of lifting weights is because there's so many.
Yeah.
But Cal Dietz just said it. I was listening the other day to his Speed Revolutions, and he was basically saying there's no more effective way to add sports kind of specific strength or change the quality of the tissue of the athlete than isometrics. They can handle so much more weight.
Mm-hmm.
I've got almost all of our basketball players. Even little Grayson, who was 107 pounds. I think I did not let her try 225. She wanted to. I stopped her, but she did 185 for that 7 seconds, all 4 sets. She was 107 pounds.
How do you get them? Just out of curiosity, how do you get them? This is something I haven't done in my program, but how do you get them set up in it? Is it just one of those? Unrack it like a squat. They lower themselves down and they just hold, and then do we have safeties? Because I gotta imagine after 7, it's like I'm trying to
bring this. Yeah. So we bring the safety squat bars up to where it's just above where they are squatting to. So if they need to, but it rarely happens. They normally get themselves up out of that. It only happens when it's really, really super maximum.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really let them do that. I probably should. But I feel like another one of those kind of like Eastern Bloc things is if you can get the car for $500, don't pay $1,000.
Yeah.
So if I can get a good adaptation with less, then why go heavier? And so I don't, there's only 1 or 2. I keep going back to Chantel. She's a powerhouse of a female athlete. I let her do that. She used 275 her last 2 sets, and she went ahead and sat it down, and then we lifted it back up. For the most part, though, they get down. So my process is slowly evolving because we just added safety squat bars. So I'm doing a little bit of the Hatfield squat where they put their hands out there. I reached out to a couple of people, Brandon Herring, a couple other people, and I was like, all right, exactly what am I doing with their hands? Because and I was making a mistake. The very first time I did it, I had to, and I'm glad he told me. I had the J hooks up too high. They squatted down, and their arms were up, and then he said, "Nah, they'll hurt their shoulder if you're not careful." And I was like, "Oh my God, glad I asked." It's great to lean on people, but so I'm not doing that much with our females yet because they were using straight bar for years. So now we got safety squats. And they're like, "This is the greatest thing ever." So they're like this, but and tissue quality and just like changing the strength of the entire area in that adaptation in a very sports specific way is really something else. And you do isometrics and then you go back to concentric lift, especially as a DBT, and you're just mind boggled at how strong they are.
Interesting. So I know you're a Cal Dietz guy, so I know that Cal Dietz has got his own little spin on his split squat where he'll take the heel and raise it up. Just slightly. Is that something that you might throw in with this split squat, or are we always usually flat footed?
No, we started flat footed.
Okay.
But then now he's talking about getting that heel up and kind of rolling onto the big toe, to strengthen that foot. And so that's what we're coaching now. I guess people say don't steal programming or whatever, but I don't know if that's stealing programming or not. But that makes so much sense to me. Like, get them strengthen that in an isometric position. You know, people probably look at that and oftentimes say, especially long duration, like there's so many different adaptations you could force with just time and isometrics. I can't remember where I got it. It might have been Chaldees, one of the isometric, or no, I think it was Alex Santera. He's talking about going 1 inch above or 1 inch below the pain when you've got knee pain and sitting in that and finding the pain and then either going 1 inch above or 1 inch below. I mean, I'm talking like I have bad knee tendonitis. I mean, I'm almost 52, but I'm talking about gold. I started doing it with our athletes in all kinds of situations. My shoulder's sore. All right, let's get in a position and let's go 1 inch above the pan and get an isometric. I mean, that's a whole rabbit hole too. But isometrics, we sit. I've got my girls class now up to 2 minutes twice a week. So we go 2 minutes on each leg twice a week. My guys at like 25 seconds, they all start moaning and screaming and groaning. And these are the guys that are like, I can back squat 450 pounds, but I can't sit isometric split squat with no weight for 45 seconds. And and I also think one of the things, again, with the adaptation for strength is, you're in that spot, you're strengthening kind of the weakest link where, at some point in every movement, you're in an isometric hold, even if it's just for a split second. So, that's something that's been big for us. Glute ham raise, something that some people don't like. I know you said we were talking about Cody with this. He doesn't like it because of the footprint leaves in the weight room. I don't really like it, the footprint, but I already had 7 of them in there, so we use the heck out of them. Yeah. And some of the stuff from Dr. Yessis about the technique of it, and then again watching this Revolutions in Speed Cal Dietz thing the other day about his foot positioning on the single leg glute ham. I have not even got anywhere near doing that with our kids because I really need to wrap my head around it. But those are just some things that I was like, wow. Like, it's like when I first went to the performance patterning where we were matching like a glute ham with a bent leg prime time after a squat to kind of reset and a straight leg prime time with an RDL after a squat and a march in there too to kind of reset the compensation patterns. And I know some people don't believe in all that, but Cal Dietz is a really smart guy.
Yes.
And we've seen some great things from it. But I couldn't institute that immediately. I had to really kind of get my head around it. And it's been big for us. And I think that some of this other stuff with the glute ham developer is going to be like that too for us.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. Okay, I know I've taken up a lot of your time. So one, I appreciate it. I know that we're pushing up on I think we're getting close to 2 hours. So
I hear my wife banging the dishes out there.
Yeah, she's like ready to go. Come on. All right. So anything else that you want to talk about? Again, you've covered a lot of great topics and subjects. And what I'll try to do is when I go back through this, I'll try to link as many of these topics that you bring up as I can, books, different things like that. But anything else that you want to mention before we kind of do the wrap up here?
Well, one thing, if you get a chance to read that series of books from Fergus Conley and Cam Joss called The Process,
okay,
4-part series, those books, they're like $44 a piece, so it's not inexpensive. It's worth it. Like, if you can, I'm telling you, if you want to be into the kind of he brings together the technical aspect of. I mean, I don't want to get down the rabbit hole, but I highly recommend those books. That's kind of the rabbit hole I'm in right now. Other than that, if anybody ever wants to talk to me, feel free to contact me. I've got a calendar. I mean, it's crazy that I have to have a calendar to schedule. But I got this calendar thing. It's on my Twitter. It's on my Facebook. You can get in there and schedule 30 minutes. And as long as someone doesn't schedule the 30 minutes behind you, you can talk. We can talk longer than that. I talked to a lot of people through that. Feel free to do that. I'm 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time is a great time to get a hold of me because I drive an hour and 5 minutes to work. So I got from 7 to 8. Reach out to me. I love to talk, obviously. And I love to learn from other people too. So I just encourage anybody that's interested to reach out. We'll talk shop anytime you want. And I really appreciate it, man. I love doing this kind of stuff, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was great. I appreciate it, Coach.
Yeah.
And one last thing, I'm going to have you just plug your Twitter or plug your Instagram as well, just so you got that on there so they can find that calendar and all that good stuff. So as we kind of wrap up, tell listeners where they can reach out or follow the work that you're doing at York Comprehensive High School.
I'm at York Strength 17 on Twitter and on Instagram, and then I know my Facebook isn't. I do some professional stuff on there because there's a lot of parents, but my Facebook is kind of a mixture of my rants and ravings about different parts of my life and pictures of my kids and stuff. But so for the most part, Twitter is my most used platform.
Mm.
So that's a great way to get a hold of me. But you can email me at it's mhoover@york.k12.sc.us or hoovermd@yahoo.com.
Perfect.
And
that's awesome, Coach. Well, hey,
yep.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man.
And I hope people enjoy this episode.
Me too. Talk to you later.